271-2985. You can also send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Hey, tremendous Wednesday to each and every one of you. No sense. I mean, what am I going to do sitting here for an extra 2 minutes? Why not just come in the second the show starts, right? It makes sense, right?
Also, why don't we wish them a Happy New Year?
Happy New Year and Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas, because this is only, what, the 10th day?
We got to go till Friday. I think Friday?
Saturday.
Saturday?
Saturday
is the 12th.
Is Epiphany.
Well, Saturday's Epiphany, but it's the 12th day of Christmas, I think is Friday, actually.
Oh.
No? I don't know. Anyway.
I just keep celebrating.
As Father Mitch would say, hi. How are you? How was your trip to the Republic and to Louisiana?
Well, as usual in the Republic of Texas, the sinners were lining up, hearing confessions and celebrating Mass at Our Lady of Lebanon in Louisville, Texas, which is real close to Dallas. Got to visit some friends over in Tyler, Texas, and in fact, I had the bishop on my TV show a few weeks ago.
Right,
Thanksgiving.
I remember that.
That was fun. Didn't get to see him. And then, hung out with some of the priests there, and then went down to South Louisiana. That's just one of the really fun places in the country and one of the really fun radio affiliates.
Aren't they amazing?
They are. Oh, I have such a good time.
Catholic Community Radio.
Yes.
Yeah, tremendous.
And they're really expanding and growing.
Oh, they are,
and pushing.
yeah.
And it's a big Catholic area, so it's terrific. But the people have so much fun.
Yeah.
And they let me share with it.
It's funny because they were able to acquire back in the day, there was a big, strong AM station there in New Orleans on 690 on the AM dial, and it was always referred to over the years as the Mighty 690. So the Catholic Community Radio Group was able to acquire that station. They're broadcasting EWTN programming over the airwaves there now, and they've changed the name to the Almighty's 690.
See, there you go. See? And it's so clever. That I don't know. Santa Claus doesn't come to my house. Rudolph, Donner, and Blitzen won't let him come anywhere close.
They smell the gunpowder and they're hightailing it out of there.
But one of my friends did give me a really nice 12 gauge, and so that instead of playing, I don't know how to play golf. I never played in my life. All my irons have more of a bore through the center. And so, but it was like a golf course for shooting skeet.
Oh.
And I did that. That was really fun.
That is fun. Well, thanks for tuning in to Open Line Wednesday. I'm Jack Williams. Rich Jesse produces the program. Your call screener's Matt Kubensky. And Mr. Jeff Burson handling our social media endeavors. You may have heard me say Rich Jesse producing the program because Michael McCall is a brand new daddy. Young Sebastian Finn McCall arrived on the scene yesterday at about 3:40, I believe, p.m., tipping the Toledos at a robust 7 pounds, 4 ounces. And we certainly give all of our best wishes to Michael and his lovely wife, Alicia. Michael now has his first son. Alicia has her second. And as she's raising Michael as well. If you'd like to be on the program with Father Mitch, the number's 1-800-585-9396. Toll free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. You can send us an email, openline@EWTN.com. And I should tell you, if you're outside the United States and Canada, we've also got a number for you. That number is 1-205-271-2985. That's 1-205-271-2985. And you can even text your question to Father Mitch. He is a 21st century Jesuit. Text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for a response. Text your first name and your question message, and data rates may apply. You got a couple of emails there, Father?
Sure do. First, it's from Carlos. Please excuse the sensitive nature of this question, but what defines virginity? Is it never having known another person sexually? And is it also for a female remaining physically intact? Here's the key issue. It is never having had sexual relations with anyone. That's what defines virginity. Sometimes the intact nature of the female organ gets ruptured by accidents and activities and things like that. That does not define it, but it's rather, not having had any relations. Also, this is from Dao Min Chuang, and he is a doctor who was born in Port Lavaca, Texas. Or is he not? He was born there. He probably was born in Vietnam, but he lives in Port Lavaca, Texas. There's a debate among people in my church about Jesus' age at the time of the arrival of the Magi. Many quote scholars that Jesus must be a few months old. I'm among the few who believe that Jesus was at most 8 days old, the age of circumcision. My reasoning is this. Scripture says that Joseph and Mary had to look for lodging in inns, suggesting that they did not have any close relatives that they could rely on for support, and the sole reason for them to be in Bethlehem was to register for the census. So St. Joseph had all the incentive to get out of there, to go home to Nazareth, to make a living there as a carpenter, to support his wife and newborn adoptive son. He had no reason to hang around for a few months. St. Luke recorded that they had to take Jesus to Jerusalem for the presentation at the age of 8 days old. After that, they either went home to Nazareth, according to St. Luke, or to Egypt, according to St. Matthew. So the 3 Magi must have arrived to Bethlehem to see Jesus before this. What say you? Many thanks for your ministry, and God bless. Well, first, Doctor, you've got some of the facts incorrect here. St. Luke does mention them going to Jerusalem for the presentation of Jesus. But the reason we celebrate the Feast of the Presentation on February 2nd is that it is 40 days after the birth of Jesus, not 8 days. He was circumcised in Bethlehem on the 8th day. That does not require going to the temple. It can be done anywhere. The circumcision can be done anywhere at all. But the presentation of your firstborn son had to be done in the temple. That was required. So my own understanding is that Christ would be born in Bethlehem, 8 days later circumcised, 40 days after birth, presented in the temple, and then sometime at 40 days or so, the Magi would show up. Okay? So that would be the sequence.
Good time for one more?
Let's see. In reference to sure, it's related. In reference to the phrase Jesus' brothers, I heard it said that Jesus had no brothers and was Mary's only child, but in that culture wasn't a word in there wasn't a word in that original language for cousin, so it was translated to brother in English. So my question is, why was it decided to not translate using the actual meaning of the word? We do have a word for cousin in English. It's cousin. It seems to...
There's some in-depth analysis.
Yep. It seems to cause a lot of confusion and is the source of much misunderstanding. So to an uneducated person as myself, it seems like a poor translation job if you continuously explain what the meaning of the original text really was. Would you please help me to wrap my head around why certain things are translated in a misleading fashion? And is there a possibility that we're brothers could ever get changed to cousins or relatives so that people can stop calling and asking you about it? Scott. Also, please take care of yourself. I'm newly converted and need you around for many, many more years so I can learn. Scott, first of all, I appreciate your concern for my health, and I'm not so, I don't find myself becoming impatient with that question. And there is in Greek a word for kinsman or kinswoman, such as is used for Elizabeth and Our Lady. It does exist, and they didn't use it. We don't know why, but they did use the Semitic understanding of all your relatives being your cousins, your cousins, and sometimes even your aunts and uncles being called your brothers. That's why they don't want to change it, Because in the case, say, of Abraham and Lot, his nephew, Abraham says, "Are we not brothers?" But they weren't. They were their uncle and nephew. And rather than prejudice it, and people then say, "Yeah, well, the original says brother, and you changed it, so there." No, we'll use brothers. But just to remember that the names of Jesus' brothers are also the names of the son of a woman named Mary, who is identified as the sister of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and the mother, who's also their father's Clopas. So that's they're brothers, but they have Clopas as their father, and Mary, the Blessed Virgin Mary's sister, also named Mary, as their mother, and which indicates also that we don't even know the relationship between Mary and Mary.
Right.
So that's why we have to we'll keep coping with it. Plus, it's a living.
Just getting started on an open line Wednesday. The number to call to be on the program, 1-800-585-9396, toll free anywhere in North America, 1-800-585-9396. Open line Wednesday with Father Mitch.
This is Dr. David Anders. Have a blessed Christmas and a Happy New Year from all of us at the EWTN, Global Catholic Radio Network.
Father Larry Richards.
God doesn't need you to sit there and protect him. If you receive communion unworthily, it says you could be sick or die. But we don't have to protect Almighty God. So God can protect himself. So he knows that man's heart. And if he's not in a state of grace, that communion can become the bread of death to him. You don't need to do that. God can take care of himself.
Open Line with Father Larry Richards. Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Being part of EWTN Media Missionaries is a perfect way to help us fulfill our calling from Christ to make disciples of all nations. Visit EWTNmissionaries.com and join us in sharing the eternal word with the world.
60 on 10 with Monsignor Charles Pope.
The first commandment, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no strange gods before me. In this commandment, God seeks to protect us from false claimants to our worship and obedience. And there's a great sad history of people who have trusted in gods other than him or things other than him, and the ruin that it has caused. So God is trying to protect us and call us to an absolute trust and obedience of him. He asks us to trust him above all things and above all other people or so-called gods. We have to also avoid things like consulting horoscopes, palm reading, clairvoyance, recourse to mediums, any desire to try to control things apart from God. God simply says, trust me, I'm the Lord your God. I am the first commandment. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no strange gods before me.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
To the phones we go. Our leadoff hitter today is Ryan. He's in the Republic of Texas, listening in Midland, Texas to Guadalupe Radio. Ryan, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Padre.
My pleasure, Ryan. What can we do for you?
Okay. I'm curious, why is it that certain priests who are not bishops, such as proto-notary apostolics and cardinal priests, are permitted to wear everything that a bishop wears, the mitre, the zucchetto, and the cassock, if they're not bishops per se?
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. This actually goes back to a very old custom that was back, but I think by the 3rd century already. It may have been earlier. It was a custom called the core bishop. And in that way, the word core there, C-H-O-R, refers to countryside. So it's a Greek word, choreia is countryside. And the bishops lived in the cities, but they couldn't oftentimes get to the surrounding country. So as towns began to develop large enough Christian populations, instead of having a new bishop, because there weren't that many, they would have a core bishop who was subordinate to the ordinary, and they could do most of what the bishop could do, though usually not ordained. But even in some cases, they got the power to ordain clergy. And in the Eastern rites, for instance, my pastor over at St. Elias Church is a core bishop, Core Bishop Richard Saad, and he also has a mitre and a staff of crozier. So but he doesn't usually dress in that unless he's on official business for the bishop. Core Bishop Saad is also the chancellor of the diocese, and he's oftentimes commissioned to act where the bishop can't go someplace, but we need to have an official representation. Then Core Bishop Saad will wear the regalia, but he doesn't do ordaining.
Does that help, Brian?
Yeah, that helps. Can I ask just one other thing real quick?
Sure.
Okay. Last year in September, a friend of mine told me the reason the Pope stopped granting the title Monsignor was because some priests over the years have developed an attitude of feeling they're entitled to have that title without working hard for it. I mean, is he correct in his understanding? Because I know that chaplains of His Holiness, proto-notaries, and honorary prelates are called Monsignor still.
Right. I don't know if that was his motive. I don't know the Pope and such, but I do know for this much for sure. He has been concerned very highly with careerism among the clergy. Some men want to get position and credentials and all sorts of other things, and he's strongly against that. And Pope Benedict had also spoken highly against that as well. So both of them have been involved in that. All right?
That works. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Ryan. Thanks so much for the phone call.
Happy New Year.
The number's 1-800-585-9396, toll-free anywhere in North America. Next stop, Saginaw, Michigan. Paul is in Saginaw listening to EWTN on Ave Maria Radio. Paul, you're on with Father Mitch.
Gentlemen, how warm is it down there today?
Not very.
Wow. I just got done shoveling, and I'm in the house, and my feet are still freezing inside my shoes.
I don't...
Teens.
Yeah, no, it's much warmer than that. I think it's already up in the 30s.
It's 38 right now, but it's going to be 17, I think, tonight, which is the equivalent of 40 below in Saginaw.
But
we're going to be below zero today for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, God bless you.
My question, Father, does Genesis 9 verse 6 justify capital punishment for murder?
Yes, it does.
And you want me to read the verse?
No. I know the verse that anyone who sheds human blood will have his blood shed. And
correct.
Yeah, and this is something that I think is very important to keep in mind. That it does justify the death penalty. So now you've got that in there, right? Was there something else along that line?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, if it does justify capital punishment, how would it be done? Who would do it? And by what means? Is there any answer to that?
Yeah. In the case of capital punishment, it would be done by the state. Even in the case of say the Inquisition never did any kind of execution or torture or anything. They handed people over to the state. So that's an important distinction. So the state can have the legitimate authority to use on the death penalty. Now, at the same time, we also see that the church very much wants to see an end of the death penalty. That would be very much one of the goals of, that we'd like to see, so that the states, the various countries don't. And the reason for that is the various governments have been rather uneven in their prosecution of the death penalty. And another problem along with that, when it is used unjustly, it cannot be undone. There was just a woman last year who, she's pretty elderly now, I think in her 80s. When she was a 12-year-old, she accused a black man of assaulting her to molest her. And he denied it. And finally, 72 years later, she admitted that it was a false accusation. Now, you can't undo that. And this is where you have to be extremely careful. That doesn't mean that it's completely unjustifiable. It's justifiable. But is it something that is necessary? And does our society want to go in that direction? We've also seen extremely arbitrary uses of the death penalty in many modern countries. They like to point out the Inquisition and such as that, which in its history altogether handed over just under 6,000 people to be executed. That's 6,000 people over a 600-year period. Whereas modern states, especially socialist and communist states that are atheistic in nature, handed over tens of millions of people to false accusation and the death penalty. And so in the wake of the 20th century's evil use of the death penalty by states like Soviet Union, socialist states like Nazi Germany, etc., that is something that we want to, keep more guard against. And then also in this country, along racial lines, the evil of prosecution of people more severely because of the color of their skin was a great evil. So that's the hesitation. Does that make sense?
It sure does. Very good answer, Father.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate the phone call. That opens up a line for you at 1-800-585-9396. Toll free anywhere in North America, 1-800-585-9396. Not to put you on the spot, but if I'm not mistaken, when the new catechism that was promulgated by St. John Paul II originally came out, which would be the one with the tan cover.
Yeah.
When the newer one came out, which is the one with the green cover, one of the few changes that was made was the language on capital punishment, if I'm not mistaken.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And they moved towards a stronger prohibition of it.
Yeah, and really the reason behind that is that in our current culture, it's pretty well possible to keep somebody away from the population if you need to, right?
That's right. You can, in Western society, like the United States, you can isolate criminals that need to be isolated. You can't let them back out. They're dangerous. And you also have to be careful about them in prison because they are also dangerous to their fellow prisoners.
Right.
Often enough. There's a lot of murder that goes on in prisons. So you have to keep them isolated from harming other people. But we can afford to do that. It's a big expense. but we can afford that. And then we have to also take a look at the causes of this. And, it's not just poverty by any means. You especially want to look to family breakdown. Remember, 80 to 85% of all inmates are the children of unmarried parents. And then look to drug use as well.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Open line Wednesday with Father Mitch.
EWTN News Nightly with Lauren Ashburn.
I met the Pope when he came to Washington, D.C., and from that moment on, I knew that I had to combine my faith with journalism, my job. I love coming to work because I know that I can talk about God on television and my pro-life views. And now, not only do I share it internally, but I share it with a global audience. How great is that?
EWTN News Nightly with Lauren Ashburn. Weekdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popchak.
Did you know there are two kinds of tantrums? The first type, distress tantrums, are the most common in children 4 and under. They aren't the result of children trying to manipulate you as much as your kids being overwhelmed, overstimulated, or frustrated. The best cure for distress tantrums is bringing your child to a quiet place and providing lots of loving attention to help your child calm down and come back online. The second type, manipulative tantrums, occur in children who are old enough to have good self-control but still use drama as a tool. The best way to respond to these tantrums is to calmly place the child in a quiet, safe timeout place until he's calm enough to apologize sincerely, accept your direction, and rehearse the more appropriate alternative with you. How long are they in for? Well, that's up to them. Want more tips to make discipline easier? Check out my book, Parenting with Grace. I'm Dr. Greg Popchak, but you can call me Family.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Hello, this is Father Joseph Mary, chaplain here at EWTN. Did you know that the word Christmas comes from 2 words, Christ and Mass? So just as Mass offered on the feast of St. Michael was called the Michael Mass, so Mass offered on the Nativity was called the Christ Mass. In fact, at every Mass, we encounter anew the sacred humanity and divinity of Jesus. So, Merry Christmas.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to each and every one of you. Next stop, Brooklyn, New York. Joseph is in Brooklyn listening to EWTN, watching actually on YouTube. Hi, Joseph. What's your question for Father Mitch?
Hi. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
My question is pertaining to Mark, I believe it's chapter 13, and I can't recall verbatim, but I think it says something, when the desolating sacrilege is set up, then I can't recall the words, but like flee or go down from the housetop, something like that. I just wanted to know your interpretation or the church's interpretation to what that is.
All right, the desolating sacrilege was something actually that our Lord predicted and came into being about 37 or 38 A.D. Have you ever heard of the Roman... Do you know much about Roman history?
A little bit.
Okay, have you heard of the emperor named Caligula?
I think so. If I recall, he was a bad one, like Nero.
Well, really, there weren't many that were good. That's a big category, bad one. But he was, he came before Nero. He was actually 2 emperors before Nero. It was Tiberius, who was during Christ's public ministry, and he was followed by Caligula. Tiberius died in 36, and then Caligula was made emperor. His father was Tiberius's brother, and Caligula means little boot. His father, Germanus, was a very, very popular and competent general. He would have been a good emperor had he lived, but he died of I think he was assassinated. And Caligula used to wear a little pair of boots like a soldier and dress up like a soldier at his father's camp, but he was a very twisted man and quite odd behavior in all levels, both violence and sexually. And so he was later on assassinated by his own Praetorian Guard. But part of his madness was egomania. And he had ordered that statues of himself would be put throughout the empire. And when it came to the Holy Land, he ordered that a larger-than-life-size statue of himself had to be placed inside the temple in Jerusalem. And they were bringing it from the coast to Jerusalem. And there were big protests against it. That's what they were talking about as the desolating. And that happened just a very few years, about 7 years after Christ had died and risen from the dead. And that's apparently what they're talking about as a model for it. Because you can't have any idols in the temple in Jerusalem. No statues of any kind would be allowed. So that's what that was referring to. Does that help?
It does. If you don't mind, Father, another question would be, I'm a fan of the Divine Mercy. I read the Diary of St Faustina. It's been very personal to me in healing and mercy, and I very much like it. And I recall something about the time of mercy before judgment. I'm just wondering, interpretation of the times, really.
Yeah.
Would you say that this is more like the time of mercy?
This is
that?
Yeah. This is going to be Joseph. This is going to be something where it's very, very helpful for you to study more history. All of us, I'm not picking on you by any means. I'm always studying more history. And when you look at the 20th century, I'm convinced that the Divine Mercy revealed himself to St. Faustina in the 1930s, which was a horrendous period of mercilessness, and the whole 20th century was a time of mercilessness. And now we have something of a respite. It's not so bad right now compared to being in Soviet Union from 1917 till it collapsed in the early 1990s. And then the two world wars and the Nazis and Empire of Japan. These were evils we don't fully understand. We haven't seen the likes of that. We have problems, but that's why I agree with those commentators who are reluctant to start calling everybody they disagree with Nazis. The Nazis were Nazis, and their National Socialism made them that. That's what Nazi stands for, National Socialists. And those were far greater evils than what we see today. But we always have to be alert. Caligula was an egomaniacal, sexually perverse, and violent politician. They haven't gone away. This is something that Stalin and Hitler also were, and many of their cohorts. And we always have to be alert against such authoritarian figures who would use violent sexuality and a cult of personality to gain power. We always have to be alert to that and be careful.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Next up is Mark. He's in Pensacola, Florida, listening to EWTN Radio. Mark, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hey, Father Mitch. So we're talking about little boots in Germanicus, huh? Hey, moving to the Crusades. Now, I know we got limited time here, so we both know what happened in the Fourth Crusade.
Right.
They were, they went off the rails, a land grab, a mass slaughter, but it was not sanctioned by the church.
That's right. As a matter of fact, so folks understand, in 1204 and during the Fourth Crusade, the Venetians promised to carry them by ship to the Holy Land if they would help Venice conquer Constantinople, and they did, despite the fact that the Pope had forbade them under pain of excommunication from attacking Constantinople. They didn't listen. So, and then they went on to, and that crusade failed miserably.
Oh, yeah, they went on and on and on, and it was a big, anyway. So, but now what they were thinking, the knights, nobles, so-called nobles that did this, for generations, for 2 generations, they had been, they're under the belief, and now I've read evidence, that the Eastern Empire, not talking about the Eastern Rite, no evidence of that, but the Eastern Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the emperors had drugged their feet and even did some attacking and were just basically not helpful in the Crusades, and made both the First and Second Crusade to sign agreements saying any land that was liberated would be turned back to them, which the First Crusade tried to do, but when the Byzantine army failed to help them, it wasn't Edessu, but I think it was the next, maybe it was Antioch. But anyway, they withdrew their forces, and they were just basically not helpful. And then towards the end, with the Turks, what their tribal name was the Seljuks, is that right?
The Seljuks, yeah.
Yeah. And they were, it looked like to me that politically the Eastern Empire was more interested in preserving Constantinople from the Seljuks than they were retaining or trying to regain the Holy Empire.
Right. As a matter of fact, in general, that's quite accurate, that the emperor who asked the Pope to send soldiers to help him merely intended to get knights who would help him regain the territory taken from him by the Seljuk Turks. They were across the Bosporus from Constantinople. And as a result, he wanted help for that. But you couldn't get Christians from the West to come for that. They wanted to regain the Holy Land because there had been a massacre of German pilgrims around 1050 or 60. And they wanted that to stop. And so they were trying to, and it wasn't done by the Arabs, it was done, as you said, by the Seljuk Turks. Under the Arabs, they had no problem, but with the Seljuk Turks, they did. And so, and the emperor did not want the Western armies in his realm, which would have included the Holy Land. So, yeah, there was there's a lot of political attempt at balancing. And I don't know if you're aware of the word, but when politics gets really complicated and twisted with all sorts of intersecting motives, we call that Byzantine. That's what that came from, that kind of.
Oh, okay.
That's why they do that. Okay?
Yeah, there's many incidences of them pulling the rug out from underneath the Crusaders. And
That's
even in the Second Crusade, even the army coming by starving on their way to try and liberate the Holy Land, the Byzantines would lower the inadequate amounts of food and water over their walls, wouldn't even let them in to eat.
I know it. No, that was very much very much a problem. All right. Well, good.
God
Keep
bless you.
studying the
Appreciate
Crusades.
the phone call. Tell you what I would do if I wanted to learn about the Crusades?
What would you do?
I'd get a book about the Crusades, and I'd go to EWTN Religious Catalog to find it.
Along with a couple of our, we have some DVDs on the Crusades.
That's
for those
exactly
who
right.
don't know it, those are very helpful.
Have you written on the Crusades?
No. I've read a lot, but I haven't written.
I always had the great pleasure of taking a course taught by our own Dr. Matthew Bunson, talking about the Crusades. Very interesting. But you can learn more about the Crusades or anything else, a whole host of books, DVDs, holy reminders, as Mother Angelica would say, statues, rosaries, sacramentals, everything available to you at EWTN's religious catalog. Buy Catholic, shop EWTNRC.com today. We're heading to my neck of the woods, Father Mitch, St. Charles, Missouri. Cal is in St. Charles, listening to EWTN on Covenant Radio. Cal, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hello, Cal.
Cal, are you there? Let's put Cal on hold. We will give William a shot. He is in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening in the Queen City on Sacred Heart Radio. William,
Hello.
go right ahead. You're on with Father Mitch.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, just fine.
Great.
What's your question?
Yes. Well, Happy New Year to you both.
Thanks.
A couple things. One of the things, or two of the things, I think I take issue with you, Father Mitch. I believe in the death penalty. I don't believe at any time Christ admonished the death penalty. Certainly, some crimes are so heinous that a just and a civilized society begs for justice and requires justice, and the death penalty, when it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, the crime itself, it accomplishes that. My second point is, and I'll let you respond, but my second point is, in Joseph Stalin, and I'm going to just throw out the Solzhenitsyn, a Nobel and Pulitzer Prize winner who authored the Gulag Archipelago. He wrote of Joseph Stalin and him managing to kill 66 million Christian Ukrainians, Eastern Catholics, Orthodox Catholics, etc., an absolute tyrant. Now, of course, synagogues did not get touched. You mentioned it as being atheist, but the reality is it was largely Jewish. No synagogues were touched, but about 2,500 churches were destroyed. The altars turned into pig pens and latrines and all kinds of wonderful things you can also read about in the Gulag Archipelago.
Sure.
My point of it is this. We're getting to this. We're seeing now the destruction of Europe. We're seeing human bioweapons by way of Somalis and Ethiopians and other people being imported in mass by the UN, by Soros, Barbara Specter et al., to destroy Europe. And I'm wondering, our own General Patton said we warred against the wrong enemy. And I'm wondering if perhaps Hitler was the barrier, lest all of communism sweep all of Europe and or make it safe so that it wasn't invaded as it is, that diversity itself is a lie. It's destruction. Multiculturalism is a lie. It is destruction. And we're seeing that destruction of the nation states. With Hitler, unemployment was nothing. Crime was completely gone, eradicated. Abortion was banned. Gun laws were lowered to the age of 18. Birth rates set records with families. Ties to the Vatican went up. Over 2,500 new churches were built. And so I hear all of this, and at no time you mentioned socialism, but it was of a fraternal kind, not an economic kind. There was not redistribution of wealth. Taxes were lowered to almost nothing. It was an economic miracle. German children that were forced to prostitute themselves outside of synagogues now suddenly could eat. The world witnessed a miracle. JFK said, and the quote, Hitler was one of the greatest of men. So I'm wondering if you can actually touch on any of that and actually tell us some truth on the radio for once. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
I will tell you this truth. I don't know about the crime rates of theft, etc. I suspect that they did go down in Nazi Germany and perhaps in other parts of Nazi-occupied Europe. That may be the case. However, the crimes were committed by the state. And the state killed, and again, it's compared to communism, it was it was relatively small. It was 10 million. They had a shorter amount of time in which to perpetrate those crimes, but the state was criminal. Even the increase, the concordat that was made between the Third Reich and the papacy was abused and trodden upon immediately after it was signed. And if you want to take a look, great book it's called The Lion of Muenster. It's about the bishop who's now beatified from Muenster, Germany, who was fighting this in the best way that he could. Bishop von Galen, himself a German nobleman, and he was slated for execution. And as somebody who had relatives put into Nazi slave labor camps, my cousin Oleg and another cousin had both been put into them. Those are the two that I met. One was at a farming slave labor camp. The other was at Bergen-Belsen. And the only reason that he survived was because he knew how to repair shoes. And the Nazis used him to fix their boots. Otherwise, he would have been liquidated as well. The crimes of the Nazi Germany cannot be covered over, nor the crimes of Stalin and the communists. We have to look at crime as crime. And Hitler's use of the death penalty, I will stand, not only in regard to the Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals, but also to the other people that he had incarcerated or just outright executed. For instance, in Poland, where my cousins lived during the war, and they were occupied by them, it was a crime for a Pole to so much as give a piece of bread to a Jew. And the honorable people were not the Nazis. My cousins, peasants, who were able to rescue a family of 4 and keep them on their farm. And the other cousin, the one who went to Bergen-Belsen, his parents, whom I never met, also hid 2 Jews on their farm. And the Jews that you mentioned in communist Russia, yes, there were Jews in the Communist Party, but they had become atheists, as had many of the Christians, all the Christians who were in the Communist Party. Remember, Joseph Stalin was a seminarian in the Georgian Orthodox Church. Khrushchev was a seminarian who had memorized the 4 Gospels. And these Christians had also lost their faith, as had Jews. And the common factor is their atheism, not whether they had been raised Christian or Jewish, but their atheism. And that is core. As far as justifying the death penalty, sure, admitted before, it can be justified, but it may not be necessary. And I would want to refrain from it. And I say that. This is not something I speak of glibly. I witnessed a friend of mine get murdered. They shot him through the head with a pistol and beat me up. And I have a cousin that I love dearly who was stabbed to death and raped at 16 and killed. I would have wanted to have them executed by my human nature without hesitation. But I also have, as a Christian, to be somebody who cares to seek the salvation of their souls too. And that, I know I'd be giving them a privilege they did not give their victims. I know that very well. They were merciless in both cases that I know personally. But I cannot come down to their level. I cannot afford to be merciless as they are.
Next up is Jose in Aurora, Colorado, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Channel 130. Jose, what's your question today for Father Mitch?
Oh, hi. 1 second. I'm carrying my daughter inside. 1 second. Hi, Father Mitch. I just want to say I thank you for your service to the church.
Oh, my pleasure. What can we do for you today?
I was, with the Christmas and all that, I was suddenly remember something I've always been curious about. At the beginning of the Gospels,
always mention the genealogy of Jesus and how he's descended from the line of David. And obviously, in the Old Testament, there's King David, King Solomon, and so on. But I know at some point the kingdoms of Israel kind of broke into two or something. But I was wondering, like, what exactly happened by the time to the David line, by the time Jesus was born? Were they kind of forgotten about, or was there any record that they did not matter anymore?
Okay, no. As a matter of fact, the line of David had lost power when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem in 587 BC. When the Persians came in, they allowed a grandson of the last king of Israel to go back to Jerusalem as the governor. But after that, being a member of David's family, which was huge. Remember, Solomon himself had 1,000 wives, 700 wives, 300 concubines. So there were huge numbers of people claiming Davidic family background, and they just melded into the population. And that's what we see from them. Okay? All right.
Thanks, Jose. We appreciate the question. Just a couple minutes left here. We'll head to Londo in Seattle, Washington, listening to EWTN on Sacred Heart Radio. Londo, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hello.
Hi, what can we do for you?
Father, I got two simple questions though.
Sure.
Why the Catholic need to light a candle, and where in the Bible it say we need to light a candle?
Well, lighting a candle is not in the Bible because they didn't have so many candles. They had oil lamps instead because that was the eastern part of the world. But they would have those lamps lit in the temple 24 hours a day. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, and those candles were, they weren't, again, they didn't have candles, they had oil lamps. And those were there to symbolize the presence of God. So when we have the, the tabernacle, we have a candle lit, or in the Eastern Church, they still use oil lamps. And they would have that lamp lit to indicate the Blessed Sacrament is present. God is present there. Same thing with the candles on the altar. We light those candles to symbolize the light of Christ. Did Jesus not say, I am the light of the world? And that's what that symbolizes. So we have that. And then when we light candles after we make a prayer, that is meant to be a symbol of, look, I can't stay here, but I'm going to keep on praying, and the candle stays here just as a symbol to remind me that I'm praying too. And that's all that those are for.
Father Mitch, would you leave us with a blessing?
Lord bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. On behalf of our host, Father Mitch Pacwa, producer Rich Jesse, our call screener Matt Kubensky, and our social media maven, Mr. Jeff Burson, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks so much for tuning in. Back at it tomorrow with Father Larry talking the new evangelization. Until then, God bless.